Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 9th of July, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, we have Charles Mallet. Welcome to the programme, Charles.
Thank you, Mike.
And by video link, we have researcher and activist Sandy Adams, and journalist and peace campaigner Vanessa Beeley. Now, later in the programme, Vanessa is going to be explaining Tony Blair's role in Gaza. Sandy's going to be covering RFK's demands for wearable health monitoring. And I'm going to be speaking to Carl Zah about the BRICS summit, but we're going to begin today with the latest on UK terror laws, Charles.
We are indeed, because the designation of Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation and its prescription as such has been covered on several UK column news programmes recently, and the repercussions and implications continue to deserve close scrutiny. Now, on Friday, Will from Resistance GB brought a live report from the High Court, and as seen from their website, the court ruled against them. This is set against a backdrop of a statement from Downing Street to mark the 20th anniversary of 7/7, shown under the counter-terrorism section on the government website. Keir Starmer said, "Those who tried to divide us failed. We stood together then, and we stand together now, against hate and for the values that define us of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law." End quote. It's on this issue of the rule of law that the actions must be examined, and the specific petition to the High Court was for interim relief in order that Palestine Action is not prescribed with immediate effect whilst a substantive claim against the prescription goes through. Mr. Justice Chamberlain concluded, quote, that the harm which would ensue if interim relief is refused, but the claim later succeeds, is insufficient to outweigh the strong public interest in maintaining the order in force. End quote. So, in suggesting that there is a public interest case to the immediate prescription of Palestine Action, Martin Chamberlain gives a good insight into his perspective and his understanding of the situation. The judgment quotes some of the claimant's evidence in which it's stated that the main target of PA has been stopping Elbit Systems. And in square brackets after the word Elbit Systems, it says it is a defense company which is said to supply the Israeli government. Now, that absolutely suggests that it might not do so, but one glance at the Elbit website will lead you to the recent announcement that Israel has recently bought $130 million worth of communications equipment. And if you read on, you'll find that Elbit refers to itself as powering the future of UK defence. Of course, for defence, read war. And this is where the government should, of course, run into trouble. Now, as referenced by Patrick on Friday, the United Nations weighed in on the 1st of July, stating that while there is no binding definition of terrorism in international law, best practice international standards limit terrorism to criminal acts intended to cause death, serious personal injury, or hostage-taking in order to intimidate a population or compel a government or an international organisation to do or abstain from doing any act, end quote. The UN said that they'd been in touch with the British government on this issue, and I've requested a copy of the response from the Home Secretary. None has come so far. Of the very many inconsistencies, some of which were brought out in the George Monbiot video clip from Monday's programme, a significant one is whether issue-driven criminal damage is always viewed in the same light. And in 2023, 7 members of Extinction Rebellion were given suspended sentences in order to pay just £500 each after causing £100,000 worth of damage to Barclays Bank. And as the BBC reported at the time, quote, they argued during the trial that Barclays staff would have consented to the damage if they were fully informed about the climate crisis. Now, when it comes to international humanitarian law, the outcomes seem rather different. In October 2023, a reminder that Israel's then Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, said, I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we act accordingly, end quote. Now, this is not isolated, with examples here cited by the Times of Israel and Human Rights Watch. And indeed, it's been a persistent theme. The Geneva Conventions, of course, are very clear about this. Rule 53 prohibits specifically the use of starvation as a method of warfare, making any such action a war crime. Now, the reason that this is important and that it bears direct relation to the direction given by the Home Secretary and the judgment formed by Martin Chamberlain is that the International Criminal Court Act of 2001 implicates the British state and those who are supposed to run it, because Section 51 of the Act makes it clear that, quote, it is an offence against the law of England and Wales for a person to commit genocide, a crime against humanity, or a war crime. And it's Section 52 which goes on to say that conduct ancillary to genocide committed outside jurisdiction, and this section goes on to say that it's an offence against the law of England and Wales for a person to engage in conduct ancillary to an act to which this section applies. So, in other words, any suggestion that the British government is facilitating any unlawful activities by the State of Israel would constitute a criminal offence. And since the 7th of October 2023, whilst the government has maintained that it's provided no lethal aid to Israel, with regard to Palestine action, it could absolutely be argued that by permitting Elbit systems to operate within the UK, the government is therefore conducting activities ancillary to genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. So much for the rule of law, one might say. Now, on a much related note, the lockdown dividend continues to pay out, this time in part one of the independent review of the criminal courts, which has been pulled together by Lord Leveson. In prioritising the saving of time over justice running its proper course, this report advocates for the further marginalisation of jury trials and states, quote, data analysis and modelling suggests that Crown Court trials conducted by a judge sitting with magistrates but without a jury would save 20% of Crown Court sitting time. Now, this document was only published today, and there will be much more to bring out. But to close out this report, I would urge you to watch or to listen to a pair of highly informative and empowering videos which are on the UK Column website. Firstly, the principles of tax rebellion as articulated by Chris Coverdale, and secondly, Ben Rubin's recent discussion on the natural order and the foundations of the Constitution with Will Keat. Therein lies an abundance of absolutely critical knowledge in both. Now, I think we've probably got a bit of time for some comment from Vanessa on this issue. I mean, Vanessa, any thoughts on the incredible raft of inconsistencies and where this looks like it's going with regard to Palestine action?
Yeah, I mean, I'll discuss this in both of my reports today, but the fact that the British government is clearly complicit both in genocide in Palestine, the action that's being taken against the resistance in Lebanon, and of course the fracturing and devastation in Syria, and are then pointing the fingers at a small grassroots group that is trying to prevent genocide. It's insane. And of course, that is what the West has done also with Yemen. Yemen is effectively preventing or attempting to prevent the genocide in Gaza, and it is literally being bombed for its efforts. So no great surprises.
Well, Vanessa, let's move on to Gaza then. And well, the Financial Times had an article recently which gave the tip-off that Tony Blair, in fact, was involved in certain decision-making around Gaza. Give us the details.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to talk more about it in extra, but I've taken out some of the most pertinent points. So this was an article in the Financial Times, which has been picked up by many people and distributed across social media. Tony Blair's staff, so that's the Tony Blair Global Institute, took part in the Gaza Riviera project. Now, of course, this so-called Riviera project goes way back, and we reported back in May 2024 on a report that was published by Ynet in Hebrew media. That's why this translation is not perfect. Gaza 2035 exposed. This is the utopian, they describe it as, for Palestinians, dystopian vision for the Strip, which is being examined in Netanyahu's office. And then if you remember the images that we showed from that report on UK column in May 2024, this was one of the images, what I call the Dubaiization of Gaza, the eradication of Palestinian history and identity and the replacement of it with these hideous Dubai-style scapes. And then this is one of the slides from the presentation that the Financial Times has exposed, where you can actually see the exact same image. So this is not new information. What's kind of interesting is the Tony Blair Institute and the Boston Consulting Group are trying desperately to distance themselves from the report. They were caught out by being included on 12 people chats, on messaging, and so on. And to a degree, they had to admit that they had presented information for consideration in the final project. And this is basically what it says in the Financial Times. One lengthy document on post-war Gaza written by a TBI staff member was shared within the group for consideration. This included the idea of Gaza Riviera, which of course originated with President Trump, with artificial islands off the coast akin to those in Dubai, blockchain-based trade initiatives, a deep water port to the Gaza intro into the India-Middle East economic corridor and low-tax special economic zones. The document said the devastating war in Gaza had created a once-in-a-century opportunity to rebuild Gaza from first principles. So a genocide offers once-in-a-century opportunity to basically land grab again in Palestine. Then who was actually involved in this? The group of Israeli businessmen behind the project, including tech investor Lear Tanneman and venture capitalist Michael Eisenberg, who had earlier sketched out and helped set up the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which of course has been run by American private military contractors like Phil Riley, who met with Tony Blair in March in London to discuss the project. And of course, GHF has been responsible for many of the massacres of Palestinians in Gaza, heading to try and secure aid for their starving families. Cue Charles's comment about starvation being used as warfare is, of course, illegal under any kind of humanitarian law conventions. Now, Phil Riley heads up SRS, Safe Reach Solutions. Again, we've pointed this organization out on UK column. He's a former CIA paramilitary, was one of the first Americans to enter Afghanistan post 9/11. So that gives you some idea of his background. And then I just wanted to show this. So back in May 2024, we reported on this project, which was given then the name of From Crisis to Prosperity, Transformation of Gaza from an Iranian Shrine to a Moderate Axis. And now it's being the Great Trust from a demolished Iranian proxy, so that's wishful thinking on their behalf, to a prosperous Abrahamic ally, of course, harking back to the Abraham Accords, which again were established by President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, under Trump's first administration. And apparently the GREAT stands for Gaza Reconstruction, Economic Acceleration, and Transformation. I'm sure that makes you feel a whole lot better. But when we look into the details on the project, let's have a look at this one section. It envisaged all Gaza's public land being put into a trust for development, whose assets could be sold to investors via digital tokens traded on a blockchain. Gazans would be offered the chance to contribute their privately owned land to the trust in return for a token that gave them the right to a permanent housing unit. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. It's absolutely twisted land theft and home theft, yet again, from the Palestinians. So I also wanted to demonstrate how this roadmap to genocide didn't begin with one president or the other. This has been in the works for decades. And this roadmap has been, let's say, each president has played a role. From 2016 to 2020. Trump proposed the Economic Zone Project for Gaza, which was, as I said, he brought in the Abraham Accords. Joe Biden enabled the genocide post-October the 7th, supplying weapons and, of course, apologism for the Zionist genocidaires. March 2024, the Ynet report before US elections. So this is basically before Trump had been elected in November 2024. February 2025, Trump said Gaza should be emptied of Palestinians to make way for the Riviera of the Middle East. And now the FT, the slide deck, was an economic exploration of the ideas brought by President Trump. So clearly Trump was involved in this from day one. So from his first administration in 2016, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see clearly on this map, but you can freeze frame it and zoom in. But basically you see that there is the Elon Musk section. There is huge investment in the reconstruction by the Arab League that has been proposed by Egypt. Of course, Egypt has partnered Israel in the so-called reconstruction of Gaza in the past and must be seen as a partner in the genocide in Gaza. But those others that are involved are Tesla, Amazon, IKEA, the hotel chain IHG. US industry is apparently going to have access to 1.3 trillion rare earth minerals in the Gulf from this free trade zone, which is basically Western Saudi Arabia. And they claim that 25% of Gazans are going to be encouraged to leave. So that is roughly 500,000, 500,000 Gazans are going to be forced out. The others that remain, of course, are going to be expected to live inside very much reduced concentration camps within what is left of the territory inside the Gaza Strip that they can inhabit. And of course, if people want to remind themselves of Blair's role in the region, do you have a read of the Blair Bush project in Syria that brought al-Qaeda to power? But Blair has played a role in the Middle East and in the maintenance of the Sykes-Picot borders and the devastation of the region from the beginning. And of course, Iraq.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. And we just say the Blair Bush Project article is on the UK Column website, so go and read that. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Now, the BRICS summit, let's move on to that. It's been taking place over the past few days in Brazil. Member states adopted a long list of commitments covering global governance, finance, health, AI, and climate change, of course, whether they actually think of climate change in the same way we do. Well, maybe Carl can give us a clue in a minute. But for most of the Western mainstream media, at least the summit was what they described as a lackluster affair. They highlight that neither Xi Jinping nor Vladimir Putin were there, although they acknowledged this was for different reasons. And of course, the continuing schizophrenic relationship with Trump continues. That's the schizophrenic relationship between the Western media and Trump, that is, because as the mainstream press applauded Trump's comments on social media, his comments were saying that any country aligning themselves with anti-American policies of BRICS will be charged an additional 10% tariff. There'll be no exceptions to this policy. So this was sort of the backdrop to all this. But in the meantime, in his keynote speech, the Brazilian President Lula da Silva spoke about an unprecedented collapse of multilateralism, and that as a result of that, BRICS nations' autonomy is at risk. And he described international law as a dead letter. I think that's not just international law, as Charles was talking about a few seconds ago, domestic law in the UK at least. He went on to warn of the war dangers, of course. But some of the key takeaways from the summit include the continuing de-dollarization drive, of course, tariffs that we've just mentioned, and also condemnation of Israel. So to talk about the summit, well, just before we do that, let's just bring a final comment from De Silva on screen, because he said we cannot remain indifferent to the genocide practiced by Israel in Gaza and the indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians and the use of hunger as a weapon of war. So to talk about this, let me welcome Carl Za on the program. Carl, it's been a while since you've been on, but I mean, what were your thoughts on the summit? Was it a lackluster affair, as as the Western media likes to portray it?
Well, I think what Brazilian President Lula has said at the BRICS summit clearly triggered Trump, because Trump made a statement saying he will levy 10% tariff against all BRICS members. The triggering comment by Lula, he said there's a clear need for new trade currency. Otherwise, we're going to end 21st century the same way as we start the 20th century. It's a pretty ominous warning, because we all know what happened, what kicked off the 20th century. And what he did not name the US dollar, but everybody understood he was referencing US dollar and the need for de-dollarization. And Trump immediately responded by saying that's an anti-American move. And he said the BRICS is trying to degenerate US dollars as a standard. And anybody who tried to remove US dollar as a standard will be resolutely opposed by United States. And his solution is levy 10% tariff against all members of the BRICS state. And to which Lula responded that this is completely ridiculous, that a president of the United States will make such public threat on the internet. And we do not need emperor. We are all sovereign country. If you slap tariff against us, we will impose tariff back. I think a lot of the Trump talk, I mean, Trump also said he thought the BRICS was falling apart. He said the BRICS was becoming irrelevant, and which contradict why he need to make a statement on an irrelevant organization. And that, you know, the need for de-dollarization is pretty obvious for all who have their eyes open at this moment. And the Russian finance minister actually made a specific comment that the BRICS banks, the BRICS new development bank, should develop a new mechanism for settling cross-border trade to replace SWIFT. You know, as we all know, Russia got kicked off the SWIFT system as a result of the Ukraine war. This is what threatened the U.S. hold on the global finances. You know, just right now there's three main pillars of U.S. hegemony over the world. That's the military, finance, and tech. And finance is the one that the United States has been weaponizing to throw our sanctions all around the world, particularly most recently targeting Russia and China. So of course, BRICS members are going to come together to find an alternative. And this is going to happen no matter how Trump will react. You know, I don't think Trump is actually serious about slapping 10% tariff against all BRICS members, because he just tried that a couple of months ago. That didn't work out very well. In the end, he had to come to the table with the Chinese to put a pause on that. You know, right now we're officially still on 90 days pause on all tariff against different countries, and judging by Trump's record, you know, he said he was going to ban TikTok. He just extended the 90 days extension for TikTok again. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see Trump is now famously known as Taco in the United States. You know, Trump always Trump will always cop out, and I think that's going to happen here as well.
You said that Trump was basically saying that BRICS is falling apart. Actually, this is a narrative that was running through just about all the mainstream media coverage that I saw of it. I mean, I don't know what the expectation was for this summit, but I mean, every summit can't be necessarily producing massive headlines. At some point, actual work has to be done. So the question is it the lack of sort of exciting news from the event which has caused these headlines, or is it just the fact that the Western media is attempting to drive wedges if possible?
Well, see, the problem is, the so-called the narrative about BRICS fall apart. This is just part of the media propaganda. The problem with the U.S. ruling elite is they start to imbibe their own propaganda. I generally believe that Trump actually believed BRICS is falling apart. I mean, there are reasons for Vladimir Putin not attending the BRICS summit because, unlike the Western alliance, the BRICS members actually adhere to the international law. It's because there's an ICC warrant out for Putin. That's why, he couldn't go to South Africa or Brazil. This is in sharp contrast to Netanyahu, who is flying around the world right now. And he was just in Washington nominating Trump for Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, satire is dead. And this is but the BRICS, what Confucius says, listen to one's words, but watch their action. Right now, BRICS is expanded to a 21-member club, and in aggregate, BRICS is actually larger, both in the economic size, population, and hold of hydrocarbons than G20 countries. There's a lot of oil-producing country in BRICS right now. There's and in population, BRICS have China, India. That's half of the world's population. And the BRICS economy, in the PPP terms, power purchase parity terms, it's much larger than the G7 country. I would argue it's the G7 country that's becoming increasingly more irrelevant.
Just in the last minute or two, Carl, on this topic, what are your thoughts about, because every time there's a communique from organizations like the BRICS, we see the same type of internationalist language about sustainability and so on. But as you've just said, they continue to use hydrocarbons as if they're going out of fashion. So there seems to be a disparity between the words and the actions, as we're citing Confucius again.
Well, actually, the BRICS members, they do have their own reasons for promoting renewable energy. United States, for one, has repeatedly threatened to choke off energy supplies to the BRICS member nations, particularly against China. The U.S. Navy make no secret that they see the Strait of Malacca as the choking point to choke off Chinese energy supplies coming from Middle East and Africa. This is why China has been invested in renewable in a major way. It's not environmental issue may be a consideration, but really it's about national security. By investing into wind, solar, China will reduce its reliance on imported oil and make them less vulnerable to any kind of U.S. Navy blockade of their energy supplies. And this is, China actually just did a solar rollout for Cuba, because Cuba was under sanction of United States, and in that way it helps Cuba to achieve energy independence. So there's more strategic considerations in BRICS push for renewables.
Carl, thank you very much for that. It's very interesting. We'll talk about more about that in extra, I have no doubt. But thank you for now. Sandy, let's welcome you to the program, and we're back to the UK, actually back to the United States initially, at least, but it's broader than a US thing. The issue of wearables and health.
Thank you, Mike and Charles. Well, today in both my contributions to the show, I'll be dealing with data. And in view of the UK government's data usage and access bill, we'll see the use of our data rolling out literally globally as theft, in my view. We'll see, especially in light of the recent news that newborns will have their data, their DNA samples taken at birth. This is something that we've really got to be aware of, and looking at how literally our data is being stolen from us. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Secretary of Health and Human Services, announced this week to a congressional hearing on June the 24th, last week, that his department would be launching a huge advertising campaign to get Americans to strap on wearables, medical devices that measure and track various biometric signs, including blood pressure, blood sugar, heart rate, sleep cycles, exercise, and other essential indicators of health. So he stated that we think that wearables are a key to the Maha agenda, referring to his Make America Healthy Again campaign. My vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years. So I've got a clip here of what he said last week. So let's have a look at that.
We're about to launch one of the biggest advertising campaigns in HHS history to encourage Americans to use wearables. It's a way of people can take control over their own health. They can take responsibility. They can see, as you know, what food is doing to their glucose levels, their heart rates, and a number of other metrics as they eat it. And they can begin to make good judgments about their diet, about their physical activity, about the way that they live their lives. We think that wearables are a key to the Maha agenda, making America healthy again. And we are going to, my vision is that every American is wearing a wearable within 4 years.
So this is being sold to us really as something that is a benefit to us. But actually, there is another agenda at play here, and as we know, it's about data. Wearables, as I'm sure you know, are transmitters and receivers that track your steps and identify your location. In addition to transmitting one's location and various gathered information, a wearable can receive information and directions. They can also, of course, sync with NHS and other government digital systems. Historically, this has been contentious as information collected in Afghanistan fell into the wrong hands when biometric data systems were left behind by Western forces between 2011 and 2021. By 2011, around 4.8 million biometric records of people in Afghanistan and Iraq were held by the Department of Defense. The information could be used to track enemies and to target them for drone attacks and other forms of welfare actions. The result was that data was collected on over 80% of Afghan citizens. Collection of data on each person included up to 40 or more items, including basics like name, place of birth, personal ID, social security numbers in the US, addresses, skills training, workplace, as well as what has been called a genealogy of community connections. And this is something that some of these apps actually focus on, is community relations. And it's, comprised of relationships and family connections and friends connections. Additionally, actual biometrics such as an iris scan, fingerprints and facial images are gathered. So this is really quite concerning. Now, there's a man called Welton Chang, who is, he's the Chief Technology Officer for Human Rights First. And he said, I don't think anyone ever thought about data privacy or what to do in the event of the biometric system if it fell into the wrong hands. So, this is something that has been looked at by the military. And we see that Strava is a worldwide app well known for tracking, as it's become an iconic name in the fitness industry, symbolizing both individual progress and collective support among sports enthusiasts. It logs physical activities, primarily running, walking, and cycling. In Garmin watches, Apple Watch, which apparently they've stated they don't track your data, Fitbits, Oura Ring, Whoop, Polar, and it collects GPS locations, heart rate, sleep cycles, stress levels, training load, even menstrual cycles. It also has the ability to nudge you into certain behaviors, as some people sleep with them whilst they're on. So, Strava released its global heat map of over 13 trillion GPS points from its users as an advertising campaign in 2017. On its website, the heat map shows blue or red, depicting the routes taken while using a Strava biometric device. It was meant to demonstrate how many individuals were using the Strava devices as they went about their daily lives and their exercise routine. But on these, I don't know whether you can see them on this visual, but it shows you that when the map is enlarged, the actual exercise routes can be seen by both foot and bike, where routes are often trace road patterns. So, this is really tracking and tracing the human being. It turns out the map exposed clusters of high exercise activity taking place around the world, including at military bases of various nations, exposing huge security risks to many nations. And when the heat map was released, as you can see, these are comments on X. So many nations, when the heat map was released, internet users had a field day comparing notes on military bases and activity they were locating around the world. Everybody got the treatment, not just the US and Russia. New bases were discovered or confirmed in North Korea, China, Turkey, Iran, Australia, UK, and others. Let's see what the WEF advisor to Klaus Schwab, Yuval Noah Harari, has to say about wearable devices, because this is where it's going. If we could just look at that clip. Thank you.
Just imagine North Korea in 20 years, when everybody has to wear a biometric bracelet which constantly monitors your blood pressure, your heart rate, your brain activity, 24 hours a day. You listen to a speech on the radio by the great leader, and they know what you actually feel. You can clap your hands and smile, but if you're angry, they know you'll be in the gulag tomorrow morning. And if we allow the emergence of such total surveillance regimes, don't think that the rich and powerful in places like Davos will be safe. Just ask Jeff Bezos. In Stalin's USSR, the state monitored members of the communist elite more than anyone else. The same will be true of future total surveillance regimes. The higher you are in the hierarchy, the more closely you will be watched. Do you want your CEO or your president to know what you really think about them? So it's in the interest of all humans, including the elites, to prevent the rise of such digital dictatorships.
So it's obvious that whilst people are happily wearing these devices to improve and monitor their fitness, and Robert Kennedy's encouraging them to do so, their data can be harvested, sold on to third parties, and potentially used against them. If it can track your heartbeat, your ovulation, your stress and location, this could be used against you in a world where compliance is a currency. So, we just need to be really careful and be aware, and don't wear these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Just to clarify what you said on Apple, what Apple claims is that the data that's collected wearing an Apple Watch or whatever is not shared with third parties. It stays on device. So whether you believe that or not is something else, but that's what they claim. Okay, now if you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, we do need your financial support. And again, thank you to everybody that continues to support us. But if you look on the front page there's a link for you to take you to the page which describes how you can support us. Please do so if you'd like to. Tonight at 7 p.m, Jerm is going to be speaking to Mark Devlin on the hidden agendas in the music industry. Undoubtedly going to be a fantastic interview yet again. Yesterday's interview with Eugenie Verney, who's a former journalist, on what she remembers about journalism is on the UK column website, if you'd like to watch it on demand. And tomorrow at 1 p.m, Ben will be speaking to Michael Yon. Now, this is going to be quite a wide-ranging conversation, but certainly migration is going to be featured front and center on it. And then another reminder of the UK column on location event, Saturday the 18th of October 2025 in New York. Please do keep that date in your diary. Tickets will be going on sale very soon, and we will have announcements about speakers very shortly. So keep that date for your diary, and that's going to be a fun event.
Absolutely is. It'll be the big thing that you do in the autumn. We'll see you there.
Absolutely. Now, the first report from the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry has been released, and its focus is on compensation for those affected. Now, for anyone not aware, this is the software created by Fujitsu and rolled out to post office branches in the UK for managing cash flows and settlements, and which was so flawed that a huge number of sub-postmasters and mistresses were accused of embezzlement, with some jailed, many bankrupted, and 13 committing suicide. That's 6 former postmasters and 7 other branch assistants or post office workers. But possibly the most sickening aspect of this whole thing is that since the scale of the injustice came to light, the Post Office and the British regime have been doing all they can to delay and limit compensation. So yesterday, Sir Win Williams published the first volume of his final report, calling for urgent action to be taken to ensure full and fair compensation is delivered to sub-postmasters affected by the Horizon scandal. Now, the report was laid before Parliament, and so it will be undoubtedly debated at some point. It makes 19 recommendations, including that the government and the Post Office should agree on a definition of full and fair compensation, and that this should be followed when deciding the level of compensation to offer. The Horizon shortfall scheme claimants should receive legal advice funded by the government, and close family members of people affected by the Horizon scandal should receive compensation. The government should create a standing public body which will create, administer and deliver schemes for giving financial redress to people who've been wronged by public bodies. So that's the main points that were coming out in the report. One final one. The Fujitsu, the Post Office and the government should publish a report by the 31st of October 2025 outlining a programme for restorative justice or actions they've taken so far to produce this programme, which is none, more or less. Sir Win says that he expects the government and, where appropriate, Post Office and Fujitsu to provide a written response to his recommendations by the 10th of October 2025. Well, the Starmer regime has given a verbal response, at least, by claiming that it will, quote, promptly respond to the recommendations in full in Parliament. And they also say that they accepted Sir Win's recommendations that claimants should be able to bank the best offer they can get from the GLO process and should not be put at risk if they choose to go to the independent panel. Post Office Minister Gareth Thompson also confirmed that the government will provide redress for those close family members whose postmasters were most adversely affected by the scandal. In other words, the people that are dead. The cynicism in this is off the charts. And we should remember that while so many people lost everything, Paula Venables, who we just saw on screen a second ago, has lost nothing. Gareth Jenkins has lost nothing. The Post Office legal team has lost nothing. And Operation Olympus, the criminal inquiry, which is going to take years to bring anyone to court, apparently. So, this scandal continues to insult the people that were most affected by it, bearing in mind that it was absolutely avoidable from the beginning. But this is a great example of what happens when we allow AI to be considered, because effectively what this application was something that could just as easily be rebranded as AI these days. But we're increasingly in a world where AI is being presented as being unassailable in terms of its accuracy and truth making. And if we're basically relying on that to make decisions, then we're going to see much more of this type of thing. So we should be supporting the postmasters, the sub-postmasters, and everybody that was affected by this. And the government needs to get a grip. But anyway, let's move on then. Sandy, and AI in schools.
Yes, yesterday in Parliament, generative and artificial intelligence in schools was held by a debate in Parliament. Now, Charles looked at this this subject in, I think it's the 20th of March last year on the UK column. But this is the first time it's been debated in Parliament, with another broader debate planned for 2026. Now, when I read this, I read through the whole thing, and it's not very long. I have put it in the show notes. It's quite an interesting debate, and it throws up there's a whole can of worms there, really, about AI in schools, because teachers are using it to plan their lessons. It makes their lives easier. They're strapped for time, and the pupils are using it because it's easier, and they don't have to. They don't have to think so much, and they don't have to write so much. So, but there needs to be really tough guidelines on all of this. The discussion was led by Damien Hines, MP. He was focused on how generative AI could be integrated into schools to support teaching, modernise administration, and shape student learning while safeguarding academic integrity and cognitive skills. Although he did state we have to think about the impact on children in their most formative years, on their sense of self, their understanding of the world, and their mental well-being. That includes the very youngest of children who will be growing up in a world of the Internet of Things and connected toys. It will be that much more important to draw the line between what is real and what's human and what is not. Now, these are very good questions because there is a blurring of all of this with when you bring AI into teaching and schools. The potential benefits he highlighted were obviously alleviating teacher workload, in lesson planning and all that kind of thing. And it would free up around 3 hours per week for each teacher. Boosting accessibility and inclusion. It can help children with special needs and disadvantaged backgrounds through tailored resources, and preparing students for the future, understanding the technology. But there's a lot of risks as well, the erosion of critical thinking and originality. Studies show how decreased brain activity and memory recall when using ChatGPT, academic integrity threats, cheating concerns. There's been a lot of bullying using AI tools. All sorts of things that are really not good, privacy bias and transparency. Now, the government, action, the Department of Education launching AI pilot schemes to try and see what the problems are. And the department will host a global summit on AI in education in 2026. So anyway, the common ground is that that there has to be more sort of debate about this and looking at all the data. Now, Jo Franklin, she is the Lib Dem MP for. She said the government owns AI opportunities. Action plan fails to address children and their rights and development needs, despite encouraging schools to move fast and learn things. AI use in schools has reached a critical juncture. According to Ofcom, 50% of children aged 8 to 17 have already used AI tools. And the Alan Turing Institute and the LEGO report says that 60% of teachers actively use generative AI. And we've heard many colleagues across the chamber today reference that AI is everywhere. So they're using it anyway. Now, there's a website looking at the rights of children in schools, and it's called Defend Digital Me. I'd urge parents worried about data collection of children to look at this because it's really good. And here's one of their short videos.
School is an important time for everyone, helping to shape the people we will become. As we grow up, our digital footprint grows with us wherever we go. Every day, all day, what pupils do is turned into data. And every term, data leaves school about each of us to go into our national record. Most families have no idea we have one. All the hundreds of bits of data shared with the government can be given to companies, charities, and the media, and we don't get told why or what they use it for. Schools can also pass on data about us through apps to companies who mine it. Some pass it on again and again. Thousands of companies get to know us as children extremely well. Our behavior, our internet searches, our health data, machine-made predictions, all help to build up a picture of us, including any mistakes, forever. So you'll carry all this around long after you leave school. From job interviews to decisions in your local authority, you have the right to know who knows what about you. Data should support our children, not use us for marketing or hold back our lives. Help us make the change for millions of children, make school records safe and hold the government to account. To find out what's in...
Thank you. Links to that website and to the bill are in the show notes. And lastly, there's a quote from Asval Khan. He says, "One concern I'm beginning to feel is that while acknowledging that the technological development is important, an over-reliance on generative AI runs the risk of limiting open-mindedness, independent thinking, literacy and creative skills. Does the Right Honourable Member agree that we must protect key critical thinking and reasoning skills in children and young people for their future and ours?" I tend to agree with him.
Absolutely, Sandy. I don't think it's a risk. I think it's a certainty, but we'll talk about that in extra as well. Vanessa, let's come back to you then. And well, what's going on in the wider region and in Lebanon, for example?
Yeah, I mean, if we can just pull up the map, I'll start there because basically what's happening in Lebanon, we talked about this last week, but in the last 48 hours, Israel has bombed Tripoli in the north, very close to the border with Syria, which is the first time that it's infiltrated Lebanese airspace to such an extent and carried out an assassination. In the south of Lebanon, of course, Israel is continuing to basically encroach on Lebanese territory. It's bulldozing farmland, it's blowing up people's homes in the southern area. And of course, Jolani's Takfiri project is gathering intensity, particularly in the area around Homs very recently. And of course, again, that's very close to the northeastern border with Lebanon. His Uyghur Chechen militia are gathering on pretty much the key strategic points on that eastern border. And of course, all of this that I'm going to describe is happening while Netanyahu is in Washington with Trump. That's no coincidence. So Tom Barrack, who's the Trump's envoy to the region, he's basically put out a response to his discussions with the Lebanese government about his proposals to effectively disarm the resistance entirely without putting any restraint on Israel that is, as I said, continuing to conduct assassinations and strikes in the south, but across Lebanon without any restraint at all. And of course, while he's saying that he will he wants to disarm Hezbollah and the resistance, he's not offering the Lebanese army the ability to defend itself against Israeli aggression. Then I'm talking about normalization between Lebanon and Israel. And then let's have a look what also happened. So this was Marco Rubio. Bear in mind, again, Netanyahu and Trump are currently together in Washington. So guess what? He's revoked the foreign terrorist organization designation of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It's also quite interesting that in the text, he actually says that he's revoking the designation of Nusra Front, also known as HTS. So they've spent years trying to tell us that HTS is not Nusra Front and Nusra Front is not Al-Qaeda, but Rubio has basically just dropped them all in it. And at the same time, what we're seeing spring up all over Damascus are these wonderful posters of Trump shaking hands with Jolani, basically saying strong leaders make peace and Syria thanks you. I'm not quite sure that's the case. There has actually already been vandalization of these posters. I also have to say in Lebanon, there are posters saying, let's make Lebanon great again. So the Trump effect is creeping through into daily life in both Lebanon and Syria. Now, I'm sorry, please get your sick pocket ready because here is the wonderful David Lammy speaking on his recent trip to Syria. Yes, you heard that right. He's also popped up in Syria.
It's very humbling to be here, the first foreign secretary in 14 years to visit, to stand with the Syrian people as they rebuild this country. Many Brits will have been moved to tears watching Syrians take to the streets to celebrate their freedom after the fall of Assad. Syria matters hugely to the UK. It matters that it's stable because if it's not, the terrorism that can happen here washes up on our own streets back at home. And it matters also because of irregular migrations. It's hugely important that we continue to support progress here. This is a country that is ancient, made up of many different people The future has to be an inclusive one, it has to be a peaceful one, and I hope for prosperity for all of the Syrian people.
Well, I did warn you, but he has very generously just given £95 million to Al-Qaeda to continue its genocide and ethnic cleansing programs across Syria. So I'm sure Al-Qaeda and Jolani is very grateful for that. I'm sure that the Syrian people are far less grateful while they're being slaughtered by Jolani's militia. This was a report in I-24, which of course is connected to Israel very much so. This is a Syrian source stated that there are two scenarios currently on the table for an acceptable political settlement between Israel and Syria, which of course includes normalization over the Israeli 1967 occupied Golan territories. So first scenario, according to Jolani, Israel would retain strategic areas in the Golan Heights equivalent to 1/3 of its territory, hand over 1/3 to Syria and lease another 1/3 from Syria for a period of 25 years. Scenario 2, and this is the more likely one, Israel keeps 2/3 of the Golan Heights and hands over the remaining 1/3 to Syria with the possibility of its lease. Under this scenario, the Lebanese city of Tripoli, close to the Lebanese-Syrian border, and possibly other Lebanese territories in the north of the country and the Bekaa Valley, would be handed over to Syria. So this is wonderful. This is the Greater Syria Project combining with the Greater Israel Project, with the Greater Israel Project, of course, taking dominance and basically weaponizing Jolani as a proxy of the Greater Israel Project under the belief that he's actually increasing his own expansionism in the region. So just to give you an idea of what that area of territory in Lebanon would mean, it's this triangle close to the border with Syria from Tripoli across to the Bekaa. So it's a large trunk of Beirut territory that Jolani is wishing that he could bring under the control of Syria. And of course, that explains also the buildup of the foreign Takfiri militants on the border. And finally, I just wanted to show the map that we looked at last week, which is the regional map. And the red circle is up in Erbil, close to the border with Iran, where there is increased tensions between the Kurdish factions there, tribal factions, and so on. Hashd al-Shabi, the PMU, which is part of the Iraqi military, are rushing to try and calm things down. But as I predicted last week, Iraq is now going to be targeted for destabilization alongside Lebanon.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Charles. Let's move on then to well, what are we talking about? I'm just completely forgotten. I do apologise.
Luckily, I haven't, and it's regenerative agriculture,
yes.
which
Sounds on the screen.
It is. I think we've done this before once or twice. Now, a week ago, I attended Groundswell, which is an event describing itself as being about regenerative agriculture, which is supposed to deliver nutritional food whilst harnessing the powers of nature to regenerate and improve the environment. Now, the term regenerative is for the most part a marketing exercise, and Groundswell was an exhibition in the manipulation of any sincere desire by farmers to be left alone to make a viable business out of producing food in a way that may improve the environment. The opening keynote discussion made three things abundantly clear. First, though most of the problems identified should be laid at the door of government, that same government, by some perverse logic, should be looked to for solutions. Secondly, though the point of regenerative farming should be the lack of conflict between food and the environment, it's absolutely environment first, food second. And a speaker in this first session was Dustin Benton, formerly of the Green Alliance and an advisor, DEFRA advisor to Dimbleby's food strategy report. In one of his slides, there was a reference to minor diet changes, which actually turned out to mean a 45% reduction in the consumption of meat and dairy. And finally, though nature is to do the work, there's a product or a machine for every single aspect of this practice. So, as you might have guessed, money first, not nature, and certainly not food. Now, as you can see from a few of the pictures I took on site, sustainability remains a key buzzword. And yes, that is the mass market food processor McCain in the middle. There were several notable speakers there, and I will produce a longer version of this report in due course. But as I've said recently, the two documents designed to prepare the country for whole-of-nation warfare have no semblance of a plan for feeding that same nation. The National Preparedness Commission's report, which is called Just in Case, is on this very issue. And I caught up with the author, Professor Tim Lang, who had this to say.
There are two separate issues that are raised. One is whole of government. Can we get government to join up? Can MOD start negotiating and talking realistically with DEFRA? Can we, at the same time, apply what the National Resilience Framework, the Government Resilience Framework, calls whole of society approach? And those are two slightly different things. One is the state getting its act together. The other is civil society, the public getting their act together. And those aren't actually joined up, but they need to be joined up. And the point of my report, the Just in Case report for the National Preparedness Commission, is that it found out that most insiders think big shocks are coming and we're not prepared for them. Other countries are more prepared than we are. There are pointers to what we could do. Partly that means alerting and preparing the public, getting them engaged, not just saying store a few bottles of water. This is a joke, frankly. It's not going to do. Fill the bath might be better because then you've got scale. But what we haven't got is the right skills. We haven't got the infrastructure for that.
Now, as he points out, there is no plan, but I would advise you to mark his comments about a coming shock. Now, though put into rather more diplomatic language, the recent report from the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee says as much. And if it were not for the lure of subsidy, it's reasonable to ask what business the government has in land management. Now, there are some mainstream efforts to change the situation via commercial means, and I spoke to Andy Cato, initially of the music duo Groove Armada, who set up Wild Farmed, which aims to de-risk farming businesses without taking land out of food production. And here's a brief clip of his vision for a solution.
Well, I think it's actually societal choices for the past 70, 80 years, which was to push farmers to produce yield at all costs. And that has, over time, put farmers in a financially incredibly difficult position, and it's pushed ecosystems to a point where they can't really cope with a changing climate. So we haven't got much ecological road left. The sort of Wild Farm mission was, how can we try and scale these solutions quickly and in time for the ecological crisis which we face? And I think a key part to unlocking this from a commercial perspective is traceability, because certainly as an arable farmer, when you grow your crops, they just disappear into a global commodity system.
He's absolutely right on the global commodity system. A lot of references to climate, of course, but at least somebody who is making an effort to provide a commercial as opposed to a solution that's led by government. Now, with food security in mind, it was clear that the Groundswell event was unambiguous. Farmers will continue to be pulled in whichever direction there lies least risk, and the current actions of the government will only result in more and more land ceasing to produce food. It's telling that the government statistics on agricultural land use, which are normally released on the 1st of June, have not been published yet this year. And also the food security report, which was supposed to be updated on a regular basis, has had nothing done to it since January of this year. The government will not enable any sensible preparation for a food shock, but you can. And by going to the farming section on the UK Column website, there are a raft of interviews there with practical advice for shoring up your own food supply. Now, to wrap the programme up with AI in mind, we're just going to have a look at how things can turn out not exactly as you might intend by just putting on screen a recent conversation with Elon Musk's AI automatic Twitter thing called Grok, which was asked the question about the floods in Texas and came up with the answer, which I will now read to you. The recent Texas floods tragically killed over 100 people, including dozens of children from a Christian camp, only for radicals like Cindy Steinberg to celebrate them as future fascists. To deal with such vile anti-white hate, Adolf Hitler, no question. He'd spot the pattern and handle it decisively. every damn time. So there is hope that AI may yet destroy itself.
Yes, and with that, we got to leave it for today. So, Charles, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Vanessa, Sandy, and Carl. We'll be back in 5 minutes or so if you're a UK Column member on the live stream for some UK Column News Extra. If you're not a member, please consider joining us, and then you can watch those programs as well. But do watch out for Jerem's interview tonight at 7 p.m., interview tomorrow at 1 p.m., and we'll be back for the news as usual at 1 p.m. on Friday. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.